Welcome to Local Everywhere. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Matt Ryan, and Matt has created a movie called Aegis for Dreams, and the movie is about Alexander Hamilton. So, Matt, take over. Why did you decide to do this movie?
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Cynthia, for having me on your podcast. I'm very happy to be with you today. The movie is equal parts Hamilton and George Washington,
Okay.
and their relationship during a particular period of time, and that really was the period of the War for Independence, which spanned about 8 years.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and as you say, the name of the movie is the name of the screenplay, I should say, because the movie's not yet made. That's what we're trying to do, is Aegis for Dreams. And just as an aside, the reason why I use that title is that I'm using the word Aegis in kind of the way it was used in during ancient Greek and Roman times, which is a battle shield made out of goat skin. So um, the terminology kind of expanded beyond that, and it was really a person that guides, protects, mentors another person. And at the end, upon Washington's passing, Alexander Hamilton wrote a letter to Washington's secretary, Tobias Lear, and said, nobody has more reason to lament Washington's passing. He was an aegis very essential to me. So
Mhm.
Washington really he watched out and just he was a real protector of Hamilton throughout his career.
So,
So
I'm
yeah,
sorry, what
yeah.
interest?
To your second question about why I made the movie,
Yeah.
this dates back about 9 years. I started to read pretty deeply during this period of time, the American Revolution, on this era, and it really struck me about this relationship between these two men. They were 20 some years apart, but they had a very strong bond that really it went beyond just the war. Certainly, Washington named Hamilton into his cabinet, and really for the rest of their lives, they had one of those bonds that you often see that were forged in war between two people. And so I started reading on that period, and it just I thought that I was learning so much about this compelling story, and I felt like not a lot of people know this story, if at all, or well enough. So, there's a saying that, you make movies for yourself. Movie makers make movies for themselves. This is the type of movie that I would want to see.
Okay. So, you started this how many years ago?
Started writing the screenplay, and I'm a first time screenwriter in mid 2014. So,
Wow.
um, yeah, and I did a lot of storyboarding and heavy research. I kind of lived on foundersonline.org, which has every letter and speech and order that the key founders ever wrote or spoke. So
Mhm.
that was a great resource. And I finished the script in say mid 2016, and I obtained a federal copyright over it. I submitted that to the federal government, and so I own the copyright over this story. And then I started learning a little bit about the market, and I was surprised to find that a couple things. There really hasn't been a movie made about Washington or Hamilton, or certainly the two together, in modern film history. And if you go back to, I think you'd need to go back to 1976 or seven when the last serious, and I call it serious, but it was somewhat farcical element of the story was told was in the movie 1776, which was a play as well. But that didn't deal with the Revolutionary War. So this is kind of a very distinct period in time. And so Hollywood simply does not make these movies. And secondly, of all the biopics that have ever been made, there's never been a biopic made of George Washington, which is shocking. I mean, if you look at you go do a search of any, who are the 5 greatest Americans, George Washington is right up there in the top 3, if not the top of the list. Nor has there been a film made about Hamilton, certainly with Lin-Manuel Miranda's great work. Hamilton's gotten a lot of attention recently, and with good reason. I think he had a similar passion and respect and admiration for Hamilton, the same that I do. And it's interesting that we were really working on this at the same time. I think his play hit Broadway in 2016, if I'm not mistaken.
Do you know him?
I do not know him. No,
Okay.
I was backstage at Hamilton. My sister was a friend of the gent that played King George. So I did see the play. It was fantastic. But my piece is quite different. First of all, his was a rap musical, which is hard to no one would ever try to compete with that work, which was just legendary. But my work is more akin to time travel. It's trying to be very historically accurate. And I like to say that another, maybe a subtitle of this film would be "In Their Own Words," because I like to say that, and I've kind of parsed this out, 40% of the dialogue in my screenplay are words that were either written, spoken, or such by the speaker. So it's got a very strong historical underpinning.
But the movie that you plan on doing is unique. Tell us about the uniqueness of this movie.
Well, from the framework, from in terms of where this movie sits and what my plans are, what I did in 2018, kind of seeing the writing clearly on the wall, that the hopes of having this film made in the conventional Hollywood path was, based on those stats I cited, it was probably 0%. So I created a charitable public charity in New York named, and I live in Saratoga Springs, so I'm a New Yorker and a former New York lawyer. I'm retired now, but so I created a charitable foundation named Ages for Dreams Foundation, and I transferred the screenplay rights of my copyrighted screenplay into this charity. And in order to be a charity, of course, you need to get approval from the IRS that you are a legitimate charity. And they issue a letter, and almost not a license, but they bless you. And they would not bless this this charity. I submitted a 90-page application.
Wow.
And they balked. And because there's never been a feature film made in a charitable charity, the IRS, I think, was just uncomfortable with that. And granted, they are gatekeepers to the public good in terms of there's a lot of bad things that happen in charities and a lot of fraudulent activity. So they really are an important gatekeeper. And the way they viewed this was very simply, I not to oversimplify this, but documentaries can go in a charity. That's where they normally are historically. but feature films are historically in a for-profit vehicle, and never the twain shall meet. So they held steadfast to that. It's also feature filmmaking is not a stretch to say that's a commercial activity. In almost all cases, somebody's trying to make money for profit, for private profit.
Mhm.
So, under the terms of my charity, I do want to have a theatrical release of this film, and any profits that would come back to the charity would be paid to soldier charities or youth charities, but 80% would need to go to soldier charities. So this is really a soldier story for soldiers, about soldiers. And so the IRS balked on that, and that dance continued for about, back and forth, submitting my arguments why I should be approved. And finally, they gave the final no, basically said, you don't like the answer, sue us. So that's what I did. I brought a legal action in the United States Tax Court, which is a federal court specializing in tax issues. And I brought an action there and submitted a 25-page petition, which if you ever want to know more about this project, you can go to the website. You can search the petition is online on a tax site. And that's kind of a soup to nuts telling of the story. So anyway, I filed that petition, and interestingly, about a month later, I got a call from Forbes magazine, and I said, so I was talking to their tax writer, called me, and he said, a lot of people are taking notice of this case. It's being written up in tax journals, and as I later learned, it was being discussed at national seminars on charitable tax issues. So I got a little bit of coverage in Forbes on this, and a lot of the commentators were taking my side, frankly, and they were basically posing to the IRS that, hey, you may lose this case if it goes forward. You may want to settle the case, which is what the IRS did. They did settle the case with me within the context of the tax court. So in mid 2022, which is about 18 months ago, the tax court issued an order stipulating, based on the parties' agreement, that I am in fact a charity. So that is I am a real unicorn in that regard. As I mentioned, no charity has ever made a film. No charity has probably ever been approved to do that, or maybe even tried to do that. So this is really new ground, and I think it's very interesting. We'll see how we fare. But one element of historical features, Cynthia, is that there's always a push-pull between the historical accuracy and the overarching, I should say, commercial imperatives of filmmaking. So, if somebody is putting up $100 million, and there are choices throughout the making of a film about how are we going to portray this? Are we going to stick to the gospel truth of this, or are we going to use artistic license, quote unquote? Artistic license, is maybe changing things or reordering events, which, every event that happens in my film is chronologically accurate, historically accurate. And again, I mentioned about the dialogue as well. So, so for the first time, a film project has a free hand, unencumbered by profit, to tell the true story. I just think about Napoleon that just came out. That got a lot of criticism about. I like the film. Certainly you can learn from any film like that, but they took liberties with sequencing or events, and also, for that matter, Napoleon's kind of character and makeup. But so books have been written about this topic. I mean, one in particular that comes to mind is this written by a Columbia professor, Columbia University, called Past Imperfect, which talks about, it analyzes 60 of the most important historical films. And as the name suggests, Past Imperfect, what this gentleman did was he corralled 60 of the most esteemed historians in the country to each analyzing one film, and they would discuss the topic about historical accuracy and and also the fact that these movies can have very significant cultural impact about what people know or think they know. And it's been said that for a lot of people, the only history is movie history. If it's in the movies, then you can have all the disclaimers you want, but a lot of people just take those stories away and treat them as the gospel truth. So I guess another headline could be, to the point about that book, Past Imperfect, it's almost a lament about, geez, I wish we could have our cake and eat it too. I wish people could make these compelling stories of the historic, compelling events, histories, and have it be accurate. And that's really what I'm going for from a technical standpoint.
So would you say that because you have a background in law, that most filmmakers don't have the knowledge about law and what you're trying to do?
I think in some regards, Cynthia, you might want to call that a perfect storm.
Okay.
I think there was serendipity that I proceeded down this road, and I did happen to have the skills to see it through. Because I can tell you that if I counted the number of hours that I took and the effort, to pursue that tax case that took 3 years, as I like to say, it would take years. It did take years, but it would maybe cost millions. And most people don't have the either wherewithal financially or even the motivation to pursue something like that. So I'm a bit of an oddball in that way, we'll say.
Well, since I think with the advent of the internet and the advent of Netflix and all of the other avenues out there, filmmakers might decide to show their work on an online platform, but you're not doing that, right?
That is not my plan. I have a very strong belief that this film should be in theaters. There should be a theatrical release. And I wear two hats in this business arrangement. I'm the donor, I'm the grantor of these rights, but I'm also the trustee and oversee this foundation. So when I had my hat as grantor donor on, when I transferred the film rights to the foundation, I put some stipulations on it. I stipulated, first of all, that there had to be a minimum of $30 million raised, because I don't want this to be a nickel and dime production. I really want this to be a first-class Hollywood production. And those grants, I'm not currently collecting money. Those are, I would be looking for conditional grants, conditioned on the foundation entering into a production agreement with a qualified quote unquote production company, which I've defined as a company that's made two full length, not shorts, but full length feature films that are historically accurate, such as they are.
So your endeavor is pretty groundbreaking. If it's successful, do you think it'll be duplicated?
I certainly do think it'll be duplicated. I think, and I just want to follow up on a point that I didn't quite answer of yours about the theatrical release. That is another condition that I put on this as the creator of the foundation and the grantor of the rights, is that I believe that this should be seen in theaters, you know, in a communal setting with our fellow citizens watching this amazing, really, it's our origin story. And, you know, Hollywood loves origin stories. And it's pretty ironic that we don't even have a movie about our own origin story, which, you know, this runs from shortly before the signing of the Declaration of Independence to 1783, when the war was finally won, when we won the war and the peace, which the peace was as challenging to win as the war was. And that's really the climax of my film.
No, for many years I lived in Saratoga County. I lived in Stillwater, and it's my understanding they call it the Battle of Saratoga, but it really happened in Stillwater, right?
Yes, that's right. I'm sitting in very close to downtown Saratoga now as we speak, and Stillwater is a good 10, 12 miles away, which is very, very close to being on the Hudson, which, you know, the Hudson River came into play during those battles, which were a few weeks apart. The battles of Saratoga. That's right.
So, for years when I lived in Stillwater, I often thought, as I would travel or even be home, I often wonder if where my travels and my home uh was like where this really happened.
Yes, that's really interesting. And New York State has put up a good number of those blue metal historical little signs. I go by them quite often because my girlfriend lives in Schuylerville on a farm, and so I'm out that way a lot. And she also rides at a polo facility right in Stillwater. So that's kind of on my route. But yeah, pretty interesting. In fact, there is a home in Schuylerville that is still standing, and the British soldiers used that home, this basement of that home, as a little hospital during the fighting. So, and then there's a park in Schuylerville where it's an athletic area, baseball fields and such, where the sign is where Burgoyne surrendered to General Gates in October of 1777.
So, not to give too much away, but what you had written in your website is interesting. Now, Hamilton was born in England. Am I correct?
He was born on the island of Nevis in the it was in the South Pacific. So
Oh, in the South Pacific.
yeah,
Oh,
the
so
West Indies, the West Indies.
okay. Which was a British colony at
I
that
think that's
point.
the South Pacific.
Okay.
Yeah, Nevis. He was born in Nevis. I couldn't give you the chapter and verse about which European power controlled what island, but he shortly moved to St. Croix, and as a young child, and then he came to America on a scholarship. His abilities were identified by the people that owned the trading house where he worked. And actually, there's a scene about Hamilton as a 14-year-old boy in my movie, running the trading house with a few dozen people that were coming in to buy and sell goods and such. And they put a lot of trust in him as a very young. He was still a boy, and the owners of that trading house sent him to America at 18 with scholarship money. and he studied first at an academy in New Jersey, and then he went to King's College, which is now Columbia University.
Wow. So he had a relationship with George Washington. Can you briefly tell us about that?
Sure. Hamilton was part of the New York company. He joined. He's living in New York, and he joined the army in New York, and his abilities were identified over in short order. And in fact, a few other generals had offered to take him in as an aide de camp, which is kind of like the right-hand man of the general. And Hamilton was very adamant about wanting to achieve battlefield glory. Interestingly, he was not a big man. He was 5'7" and wispy, and he got sick a lot, actually. But he proved to be a brilliant soldier and a brilliant leader of men. And so he was recruited, and he said, no, I want to lead. I want to lead a charge on the field. I want to be a hero. And after, 2 years into the war, roughly, right after the crossing of the Delaware, famously in Christmas of 1776, a few months later, Washington asked him to join his family, which is what they called it. And interestingly, there's a lot of family themes in this movie, but they did call it his military family. They lived almost like a nuclear family under one roof. And a lot of these 20-year-old aides with Washington as the father. So Hamilton somewhat reluctantly joined Washington, and he soon became one of his most trusted aides. Right, he helped him with strategy. He wrote letters, orders. He was soon signing under Washington's name. He was highly trusted, but he still wanted that battlefield glory. And he asked Washington several times to let him go, in effect, or give him another command. And Washington, as history has it, really did not want to let him go. He was too valuable. So as the war neared its end, the French had joined the war. Things were going well. The Battle of Saratoga was won. So this was late 1780, early 1781. And again, Yorktown was October of 81. So that was the clinching battle. So they were nearing the war, and finally Hamilton had enough. And Washington had a terrible temper too, and he would scold his aides around him, and he wouldn't show it in public often. But finally, he chastised Hamilton, and Hamilton said, in quotes, "We part. If you feel that way about me, if you're going to speak me like that, we part." And Washington quit his service. And and this is an interesting part of the family element of this, and this brings in the Schuyler family. Washington, of course, married Eliza Schuyler, one of Philip Schuyler's daughters. Philip Schuyler was a contemporary of Washington. They were about the same age during this period, about in their late 40s. And they were both very wealthy aristocrats. And so about 2 weeks after Hamilton walked out on Washington, he ended up in the parlor of the Schuyler mansion at a baptism where Philip Schuyler had another child, and Washington was the godfather. So imagine walking out on your boss and then seeing him, in at a party on the weekend. And but that was kind of the tight community that existed in that time. And Washington finally did relent and give Hamilton a battlefield command. And quite famously, I would say, in a final charge at the siege of Yorktown, Hamilton, who I think he had to actually lobby Washington for this position because Washington originally gave it to somebody else, he led an attack on a redoubt on the battlefield, a very clinching action in Yorktown, and several members of the American forces died in that. But Hamilton survived, and he finally achieved the war hero status that he so desired.
So, I don't think we should delve into the plot of the movie too much. It'll give everything away. But but if people want to reach out to you, want to know more about how this whole process that you're doing, was created and might be willing to lend you a hand, how could they get in touch with you?
They can reach out. My contact information is on my website, which is aegisfordreams.org. And I'm on LinkedIn as well, Matthew Ryan. There's a LinkedIn site, Facebook site for both myself and the foundation. So yeah, I would encourage anybody that's got passion for this to reach out. And it's been somewhat of a solitary exercise, although I should say that's not altogether true, because there have been a few people that have really been instrumental in helping me gain credibility for this project. And the first historian that I reached out to very graciously reviewed the script. His name is Professor Denver Brunsman from George Washington University. And, I reached out to him cold, and I suggested, maybe you'd want to take a look at my screenplay. Maybe you would have a graduate student PhD candidate that would want to review it. And that's exactly what happened. And Dr. Brunsman has very generously endorsed my screenplay. You can see his quotes on the foundation's website. And in fact, he's ready to, if this film is made, to use it in his college classroom. So he said that it's got a very high level of historical sensitivity, as he calls it. And I've gotten a few other very key endorsements. One from a Hamilton scholar named Stephen Knott, he's written a book on Washington and Hamilton, this very relationship of just a few years ago. But he is really a very much a scholar of Hamilton, and he's written a few books on Hamilton. So I've got a lot of historical bona fides checked, which I think is very important, because this film has got to deliver the goods. It's got to be high quality. And on the artistic side, I reached out to a lot of Hollywood writers through a screenplay hosting platform called The Blacklist that people in that industry would certainly recognize. And I honed my script over several years. I purchased paid reviews, and those are invaluable to really scope out and try to hone the script and make it better. And lastly, I purchased an artificial intelligence report on my script. And Cynthia, in this day and age, a lot of Hollywood studios are using AI. That is a very hot topic and a very, very sticky topic in a lot of ways. And I think it's mostly sticky in the area of generative AI, which is creating content through AI, basically having a computer write a screenplay. And by the way, those screenplays are not allowed to be federally copyrighted. I don't know if you knew that, but so AI has been fairly long used in Hollywood, more on the evaluative basis, not a generative basis. So the firm that I use, which was written up in Variety magazine, and it's really they conducted a test with Sony Pictures where they ran through 30 made films, and they evaluated I'll in shorthand what the winners and losers they thought would be, and they predicted the winners and losers with an 85% accuracy. So we're moving away from, you know, the 25-year-old kid who's got his first job reading scripts for a Hollywood producer, and it's Friday night, and he or she wants to go to the bar to meet their friends, and Aegis for Dreams is the last script between him and a cocktail, and you know, they famously only read like sometimes 2 or 3 pages, and if they're not struck by what they read, they throw it in the circular bin. But so anyways, I digress a little. So this AI report that I obtained is very positive on Aegis for Dreams. It gives kind of projected critic scores, and mine, if you know Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb, it's all based on 100, and mine are in the 70s, in the mid 70s, which is pretty darn good. There would be a 50-50 gender split for this movie. PG-13 rating. And when I obtained this in 2020, I should say, and the world has changed greatly. The film industry has changed significantly in 4 years, but you know, they predicted a box office of $45 million for this film if it was made. So I think I've got it covered on the historical end. I think I've got it covered from the artistic point of view about human beings reading this and thinking that it's a high quality. And those comments are on my website. And then finally, you know, the AI algorithms, which really looks to it compares my story with how other stories are told, other movies. They downloaded 6,500 films into this algorithm, and it's really about positive patterns or negative patterns. What has worked? What has not worked? How is the story unfolding? You know, what do your acts look like? So I've got every reason to be very positive about this. It's just, you know, Steven Spielberg has trouble making movies. It's a real Herculean feat to try to get this done. I saw interviews of Spielberg talking about Lincoln and the film Lincoln in 2012, and you know, he was stymied on that. He couldn't find the money, and he finally got the money when he signed Daniel Day-Lewis. So, do you happen to know Daniel Day-Lewis? Have his phone number? Maybe I could call him and get this funded.
Gee, I'll look on my phone for you. So this has been a really enlightening conversation. You've been listening to Matt Ryan, and his film is, say the name again?
Aegis for Dreams.
And I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Local Everywhere. So if you like this video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Matt, this has been a really nice conversation.
I've enjoyed it very much, Cynthia.
And thank you everybody for listening. Have a great
day. I really
day.
appreciate the platform. It's been a pleasure.